Masechet Pesachim, Daf Kaf Aleph 21. We're starting the second Perek. Topic will be mostly at the beginning now about Isurei Hana'ah. Not only can you not eat chametz, but also cannot derive benefit. As we go through the Perek, we'll see other things that also you cannot derive benefit from. Also, a lot of practical things about koshering dishes and different laws of kashrut that are very relevant. And also very interesting, a couple of manuscript variances we'll see today. All right, we begin. Kol sha'a shemutar le'echol, ma'achil la'behema, la'chaya, ve'la'ofot, u'mochel la'goy, u'mutar behana'ato, avar zemano, asur behana'ato, ve'lo yasik bo tanur v'chirayim. So the opening makes a connection between the prohibition of eating and deriving benefit. So any time that one is allowed to eat, that is also a time that you can derive benefit. What does it mean to derive benefit from chametz? Here's some examples. You can feed it to an animal. We'll discuss why it discusses all three types, a domesticated animal, a wild animal, and birds. You can also sell it to a non-Jew, and you can derive benefit from in general. But that's adding something. However, once that time passes, the time that you can no longer eat it, then you can also no longer derive any benefit from it. Not deriving benefit, that includes that you cannot burn it in your stove or your oven. So even though chametz that you have to get rid of, you burn, but you can't derive benefit while you're burning it. You have to just burn it outside and not get anything. If you're going to get heat out of it and cook some eggs with the chametz, that's no good. Then you're deriving benefit. Okay, so we see a close connection between these two times, and we'll discuss whose opinion this follows, because it's actually not our opinion. We have an hour in between in which we cannot eat, yet we can derive benefit from it. Okay, that's part one. Part two, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, en bi'or chametz ela Terefah. Okay, when you do have to destroy the chametz, the way to do it is through burning. That's the only way, according to Rabbi Yehuda. V'chachamim omerim, af mefarer v'zoreh laruach o matir layam. Af, they say, you can also crumble it up and throw it into the wind or into the sea. All right, that's chachamim. In other words, just get rid of it, however. Now, the word af here suggests that chachamim are adding to the Yehuda. They agree that you can burn it, and maybe they would even say that that's the preferable way. They're just adding other ways to do it. But the word af is very interesting because if we look at manuscripts of the Talmud, of the Mishnah rather, this is called the Kaufman manuscript. It's considered the most reliable, complete manuscript of the Mishnah. And you see this is the Perek Kol Sha'a, and here it says, Chachamim Omerim, Mefarer V'zoreh. Now there's no word af. Also in the Parma manuscript, says here, Chachamim Omerim, Mefarer V'zoreh. There's no word af. And also some of the Rishonim do not have the word af, and that suggests the possibility that it's actually better to throw it into the wind or the sea and not to burn it. But we'll get more into that topic next week. Okay, for now we saw the Mishnah, and the Talmud is going to focus on four issues. First of all, who is the author of this Mishnah? Second, what about the redundancy of the different types of animals? Why do you have to mention all of them? Third, a very important shita of Beth Shammai, that you would not be able to sell chametz soon before Pesach begins. And then the main discussion will be about not deriving benefit. What if it's inedible? How about during the 6th hour? How about burning in oven? And finally, what's the source that you cannot derive benefit from chametz? Good. Kol sha'a shemutar le'echol ma'achil, quoting the Gemara, quoting the Mishnah. Ha kol sha'a she'eno mutar le'echol eno ma'achil. So we're deriving the contrapositive, whatever that's called, right? If at any time that you can eat it, you can derive benefit. That would mean that any time that you cannot eat chametz, then you cannot ma'achil, you cannot give it to the animal. You cannot derive benefit either, right? There's no time when you can do both one and not the other. So lema matnitin de la Rabbi Yehuda, de Rabbi Yehuda ha'ika chamesh, deno ochel u'ma'achil, titnan, Rabbi Meir omer ochlin kol chamesh v'sorfin b'tchilat shesh. Rabbi Yehuda omer ochlin kol arba v'tolin kol chamesh v'sorfin b'tchilat shesh. We had a Mishnah already in the first perek, machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir is a little bit more lenient, and he said you're allowed to eat chametz the entire fifth hour. In other words, on a typical day, which it usually is because Pesach is around the equinox. You can eat chametz from 10 till 11 o'clock, and then 11:01 that you should burn it, and you can no longer eat. Really, from midoraita, it's at noon, but the rabbis are adding 1 hour before to burn it. So according to the Rabbi Meir, right, you can derive benefit, you can eat it and derive benefit everything during the fifth hour, but you can't do anything during the sixth hour. The Rabbi Yehuda, however, says you can eat during the fourth hour, in other words, from 9 till 10, and then from 10 and 11 till 11, tolin. You have to wait, right? You cannot eat it, but you don't have to burn it. You can actually derive benefit during this hour, and then at 11:01 you will burn it. So therefore, we see that this Mishnah cannot be the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, there is 1 hour in which you are not allowed to eat it, but you are allowed to derive benefit from it. And that would go against the statement of the Mishnah that anytime you can eat it, you can derive benefit. It's not true for Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so this Mishnah is not following Rabbi Yehuda. Well, then who is it following? Ve'elamai, Rabbi Meir hi, hai kol sha'a shemutar le'echol ma'achil, kol sha'a she'ochel ma'achil mi ba'aleh. Well, it does seem to be following Rabbi Meir, but the Gemara is not happy with that. It's making an inference from the exact language. It's good we have a lawyer here, right? So it says kol sha'a shemutar le'echol. It doesn't just say anytime you can eat, you can feed it to animals. That would be a simpler way. We're applying the idea of omni-significance, not only to, like, we're treating the Mishnah as if it was a verse. And so it has an extra word, anytime that one is permitted to eat, anytime that someone is permitted to eat, then you can also feed. Why not just say it simply, anytime that you can eat, you can also feed. So Rabbi Meir would not need that extra word. And therefore we say, no, it can't be Rabbi Meir either, because you can eat it yourself. So what does it mean that anytime that someone can eat, but not you? Well, that leads us to the third opinion. Amar Rabba bar Ula matnitin Rabban Gamliel hi titnan. Rabban Gamliel omer, holin hanechalin kol arba, teruma kol chamesh, vesorfin betchilat shesh. Rabban Gamliel was the third opinion back in the previous perek. He somewhat agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that there's 3 time periods. The first time period, 9 to 10, anyone can eat and derive benefit. During the second hour, from 10 to 11, only Kohanim can eat teruma, because we don't want to burn teruma, that's chametz, and so we want to give the extra hour for Kohanim to eat it. So in other words, someone can eat chametz, but not most people. And then at 11:01, you would burn it. And that fits into the words of the Mishnah. Kol shah shemutar le'echol, kohen beteruma, Yisrael machil chulina behema l'chayav ala'afot. So any time that someone is allowed to eat, who is that someone? Kohanim, they can eat teruma. Even though Yisrael cannot eat, during that hour, everyone can feed their animals. And that way, it fits into the words of the Mishnah very well. Okay, good. So
effectively, that's the same thing, though. No.
What?
They're both saying you could feed your animals up to the fifth hour.
They are saying yes, they are. But Rabbi Yehuda doesn't fit, because according to the Rabbi Yehuda, there is no one can eat it during that fifth hour, and yet, yeah. Right?
I mean, between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Meir, it's essentially the same time.
According to the Rabbi Meir, everyone can eat it during that fifth hour.
But in terms of feeding your animals,
yes,
both.
Right. Everyone agrees that you can feed their animals. All 3 opinions agree that you can feed your animals during the fifth hour.
Uh-huh.
Right?
But none of
we need for that fifth hour to be a time when someone cannot eat it.
Okay.
But this conversation feels a little contrived, because if they didn't insist on a hyper precise reading and reading in the contrapositive, none of these, you could have fit any of these 3 opinions into the plain text of the Mishnah. So why did they insist on doing this?
Good. Okay, excellent. We didn't realize I have 2 lawyers here. Good. So actually, Yeah, I mean, I think the contrapositive is fine. Just because why say this? I mean, isn't it kind of obvious? If you can eat it, you can also feed it. Like, why would you think opposite? So to say that these times are equivalent, that's not such a big stretch. But I think it's really not necessary to say that mutar le'echol necessarily means that you can't eat it, but only someone else can eat it. And as a matter of fact, the Talmud Yerushalmi does not say what the Bavli says. The Talmud Yerushalmi says that this is Rabbi Meir's opinion, which fits perfectly fine. And as a matter of fact, the Yerushalmi has a slightly different version of the Mishnah, also the Mishnah manuscripts. I already showed them to you, but now let's focus on this section. The Kaufman manuscript says, Kol sha'a shehu mutar le'echol, or lochal, actually. Lochal ma'achil. This one has an added word, shehu, anytime that he can eat, which suggests that it's the owner, right? Anytime the owner can eat, the owner can also feed. So actually that is clearly according to Rabbi Meir. And also the Parma manuscript, Kol she'a shehu mutar lochal, same thing. Also the Cambridge manuscript, the Rambam's manuscript, and others all have the word shehu. And so that you see that the Yerushalmi says this is Rabbi Meir because it has this version, and the Bavli is able to say it's not Rabbi Meir, it's Rabban Gamliel, because it does not have the word shehu.
Right, but why did they could say it, but like, well, why bother? Like, it just seemed like an unnecessary rhetorical addendum that they didn't have to do.
Right, they didn't have to. I think that they want to bring the Mishnah more in line with what they decide is the final halacha, because nowadays, as you know, we do have 3 sections, right? We do add an extra hour, like Rabbi Yehuda. And so, I mean, effectively for us, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabban Gamliel are the same because we don't have teruma. And so by doing this, we don't have to say that halacha is against the Mishnah. We're able to interpret the Mishnah to be in line with what the rabbis have decided the halacha is.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, excellent. So now we move on to the next topic. Lama li lemitna behema, lama li lemitna haya. Why do I need to mention both domesticated animals and non-domesticated? Non-domesticated, you could think of like weasels and mice, things like that. Behema would be maybe a sheep that you have in your house, or even a dog. Siricha, di tana behema, di ish mishayera hazila. So generally, if you have a sheep that's you feed it something and it eats and it doesn't finish it, it'll leave the leftovers there. However, a weasel, a mouse, whatever it doesn't eat there on the spot, it's going to hide in some corner. And that's not good, because now, if the dog leaves something left over, you'll see it there. And so then you'll take care of it, you'll clean it up, you'll get rid of it. So that's permitted. But I might have thought that I should not feed it to a mouse because it's going to go hide it. And now I'm going to have to go and do b'dikat chametz again. So don't feed it to the mouse during that hour. Therefore, the Mishnah dimension says it's fine, you can feed it to the mouse, and it'll you'll have to watch over it, and or at least have in mind that it went and hid something and do bitul. Okay, and the other way around, let's say it just said that you can give it to a non-domesticated animal. Well, at least if it does leave over, it'll hide it. And that way you don't have to see it. You don't have to violate bal yada'eh. But an animal, you're going to feed it to the dog, you're going to assume it ate everything, and then you're not going to pay attention and go back and check, and it's going to leave it there right in the middle of the floor. And then you will violate not seeing it and not having it. And so I might have thought that it wouldn't be allowed to feed it to the dog, and therefore the Mishnah mentions both are permitted. Right? This is very interesting because it's like the very same criteria you're using in both directions. The fact that it can be hid or it's there out in the open. But there are reasons to suggest that each one could be more lenient and more stringent. And so therefore, actually, it doesn't matter. If it is going to hide it, you'll do bitul. If it's there right in front of you, you'll make sure and get rid of it. And so either way, it's permitted. All right, so that's the two kinds of animals. How about birds? Ofot lamali. Oh, well, since you mentioned animals and non-domesticated animals, all right, we'll throw in birds also. They kind of go together as a group. This is just interesting, right? Because we spent so much time figuring out why it says these two, but birds, like, there's no particular reason. Birds are just part of the group. All right, so that resolves the second topic. Now, third, mochro lagoy. Bishita, right? Of course you can sell it to a Gentile. Why would you think not? Why does Mishnah even have to say this? So actually, it's not so simple at all. Beth Shammai omerim lo yimkor adam chametz lagoy, ela im ken yodea bo sheichle kodem Pesach. Ubet Hillel omerim kol shah shemutar le'echol mutar limkor. So Beth Shammai has a very important opinion here. He says you cannot sell your chametz to a goy right before Pesach. You have to give him enough time that he could eat it all. In other words, you are actually responsible for your chametz even after you sell it. The real law is you have to get rid of all chametz from everywhere. All of your chametz has to be destroyed totally. This is a little remnant of the original Torah law that says you have to get rid of all chametz in the whole country, right? No one is allowed to have any. And so here, if I have 10 cases of beer and I go and give it to my doorman an hour before Pesach, no good according to Beth Shammai. I have to give it to him some days before, enough time that he could actually consume it. I don't have to go and check to make sure he actually consumed it, but at least the possibility of him having consumed it.
Rabbi, I just wanted to confirm. You're saying possibility, but the text seems to say that that doesn't say that he could. It says that
you're right. It even says that that he actually destroyed it. Okay, that's a good point. But it's hard to imagine that he's going to go back and check on him. It is similar to like in Shabbat, if you give something to a non-Jew to carry for you, and so it has to be that to a messenger, he has to be able to get to the city in time for Shabbat, and we don't have to go follow him and check that he actually did. So that's a good point. That's a good question. But so according to Beth Shammai, really you would not be allowed to sell your chametz soon before Pesach. You have to give it enough time. So that's why the Mishnah had to go out of its way and say you can sell it to a non-Jew even during that time period, during that hour when right before, that's fine. Because Beth Hillel says kol shah, anytime that you can eat it, you can also sell it, even 1 minute before, at 10 o'clock. So actually, you see that now we can appreciate the language of the Mishnah much better, as opposed to what the Gemara just said, that we're learning the contrapositive. It's actually the Mishnah itself. Anytime that you're allowed to eat it, you're allowed to sell it to a non-Jew, and not everyone agrees with that. So the Mishnah is actually giving us a big chidush in that statement.
Rabbi, sorry, one more question. Could you get a little cute here and say that the goy is allowed to eat it until Pesach starts, so he has another 6 hours or whatever to eat it?
Does the goy have to add an hour or more?
Or not even an hour? Does he have to do on the 14th, or could he wait till the eve of the 15th to finish?
Right. I would assume that he would have to eat it by noon, because really that's already Pesach. You're preparing Korban Pesach at that time, and so the chametz has to be gone. And if it was Bet HaMikdash times, it couldn't be around at all.
Okay.
Good. Now, part of that same Baraita is the third opinion. The Yehuda ben Betera omer kutach v'chol minei kutach asur limkor 30 yom kodem laPesach. Kutach is a delicious Babylonian dish made out of moldy bread and sour cream. I haven't tried it, but I hear it's fantastic. If you like blue cheese, you'll probably like this too. This was deeply fermented, and so could last a very long time. And so this kutach, because it is chametz, and it takes a very long time to consume it. It's just a condiment. You have a little at a time. And so if you do have some of this kutach, then you cannot sell it even within a month of Pesach, because you have to, again, give the non-Jew enough time to finish it off, and nobody can finish kutach in a few days. You need a lot more time. So you see, the Yehuda is in the same vein as Beth Shammai. But perhaps he wouldn't totally agree with Beth Shammai. Maybe he's just saying, in particular, kutach, it's like impossible for anyone to finish this. So that is there's an extra stringency in that regard. All right, very good. Now, mutar b'hana'a, also peshita. You just gave me a whole list. You said I can't feed it to an animal, and then a general thing. You can't have hana'a. What is this coming to tell us? La siricha sheharacho kodem zemano. Here's what you did in the morning. Sometime you burnt the chametz to such an extent that it is no longer edible. Perhaps not even to a dog, but you could still be able to use it for something else. So let's say, so once it's not considered chametz anymore, it removes the definition of chametz, then you're allowed to derive benefit from it because it's not edible. So this would be like maybe you could burn it and as a fire. And this is important halacha because this applies to things like whatever, toothpaste or detergent or I don't know what. Things that might have chametz in it but are not edible. Once they're not edible, then they are no longer considered chametz, and they can one can derive benefit from them. Very good. Now, avar zemano asur b'hanato peshita. Right. Once the time passes, then the time of eating passes, then you can no longer derive benefit. Isn't that obvious? It comes to teach us that even the Rabbanan hour or two, according to the Yehuda, during that hour in which you are not allowed to eat it mid-Rabbanan, you also cannot derive benefit from it. Damar Rav Gidel, Amar Rav Chia bar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, HaMekadesh mishesh sha'ot u'lamala, afilu b'chayteh kur danyata, and chosheshin kiddushin. So if someone, in order to be betrothed a woman, you have to give her something of value. And so if someone takes a piece of wheat and gives it to a woman during the 6th hour, in other words, at 11:01. At 11:01, technically, chametz is permitted midoraita. Only midrabanan is not allowed. So if I give it to her, and I say haret mikudeshet, technically we should be married, right? We should be betrothed mid deoraita. And so this comes to add and say that once it's asum midrabanan, it has no value at all, and therefore you cannot use it. Therefore, it has no value, and you don't have to worry about that. Even maybe they're mikudeshet. She can go and marry another man, doesn't need a get or anything, and even if it's this type of wheat from this Kurdish wheat. Kurdish wheat we saw sometime before. It's very hard wheat, and so it's difficult for it to become chametz. So if it does become damp, the rabbi said, listen, you have to worry, maybe it became chametz. It's like the least possible form of minimal chametz. Even that, which is hardly chametz, that we say that since it could be chametz, it's asur midrabanan. You cannot derive benefit from it, and if someone does use it for kiddushin, the kiddushin, we don't have to worry. It's not a kiddushin at all. So that's what's coming to add. Not only when it's asur midrabanan, even when it's asur midrabanan, it has no value anymore. Good. Next section says v'lo yasik bo tanur v'chirayim, and you can't use it to burn as fuel productively. Peshita la sericha l'Rabbi Yehuda damar en bior chametz ela Terefah. Right? Isn't this obvious? Well, it's coming to tell us something about Rabbi Yehuda. He's the one that said that when you do bior chametz, it has to be with burning. You might have thought to say that while I'm burning it, I may as well derive some benefit. Maybe it's a little cold out. Maybe I want to cook some eggs while I'm burning my chametz and use the chametz as fuel. And no, that's what comes to teach us. Even at the time that you were actually burning it, you cannot derive any benefit from it. You got to burn it outside and not derive benefit from the heat. Okay, good. Now, Amar Hizkiah. So here's now our main topic. Minayin lechametz bepesach she'asur b'hana'a, shenemar lo ye'achel chametz, lo yehe bo heter achila. Okay, how do we know that you cannot derive benefit? The Torah seems to only say explicitly that don't eat it. But if I wanted to say don't eat it, it could have said lo yochal chametz as an active verb. Don't eat chametz. Instead, it said chametz should not be eaten. While using the passive verb form, that seems to add something. It says, don't even do anything that might lead to the possibility of eating chametz. If you could derive benefit from it, then you could sell it and you could take the money and then you can go eat something. And so it could lead to a benefit of eating. So therefore, the passive says in any manner, no deriving benefit. Tama dechatav rachamana lo ye'achel chametz. Halo katav lo ye'achel. Havamina isur achila mashma. Isur hana'a lo mashma. So they're just analyzing Hizkiah. So it's only because the Torah used the passive verb. That's why we know that. But otherwise, if you use an active verb, then we wouldn't not know that. Okay, and we say that to contrast with another opinion. Upiligad Rabbi Abhu, another Amora. Damar Rabbi Abhu, kol makom shene'amar lo ye'achel, lo tochal, lo tochelu, echad isur achila, ve'echad isur hana'a mashma. עד שיפרט לך הכתוב כדרך שפירט לך בנבלה. Rabbi Abhu has a different way of reading this grammar. He says anytime it says any of these forms, it shall not be eaten. In the passive, don't eat. In the active, lo tochelu, also active. Doesn't matter. All these verbs mean no eating and no deriving benefit. Even if it's an active verb, it still implies no benefit. So in other words, according to the Rabbi Abhu, the default for all isurim in the Torah is that if you can't eat it, you also can't derive benefit from it. They go together. That's the default. And the only way you can undo the default state is if the pasuk goes out of its way and says that, you know what, this thing, you are allowed to derive benefit from it, as it does regarding Nevelah. Detanya, lo tochelu. Now this is a braita, this is a midrash in the Sifrei Devarim. It says, lo tochelu kol Nevelah, lager asher bisharecha titenena v'achala, o machol anochri vegomer. And so you see this pasuk says, lo tochelu, don't eat it. If it just said don't eat it, then according to the Rabbi Abhu, I would assume not only don't eat it, but also no benefit from it. These two things go together. But this time it says, lager, to the stranger who lives amongst you, you can give it to him as a gift. Or it would be a ger toshav, right? That not a ger who converted. And he can eat it. Or you can sell it to a foreigner, and then they can eat it. So since this pasuk goes out of its way and says that you can give it or sell it, now I know that this one I can derive benefit. And so we see the contrast here. Let me show you in the outline. Hizkiah says the default anywhere in the Torah, if it says don't eat, I assume it means only eating is the problem, but I could derive benefit unless there's some word uses the passive form, and then I say, oh, this one is different than the default. So chametz, it uses lo ye'achel, and that's how I know it's I can't derive benefit from it. But otherwise, active verbs, the default is it's only talking about eating. The Rabbi Abhu assumes the opposite. He comes to Torah assuming that everything that's prohibited to eat is prohibited to have benefit also, unless the pasuk goes out of its way and say, oh, you can give it to a non-Jew, or you can feed it to a dog. In that case, I would know that I can benefit from it. Okay, that's the machloket. We started quoting this baraita, which is going to try to match up the Tanaitic opinions, Meir and Yehuda, with these two. So we're going to do some back and forth here regarding these pesukim. Okay, so the Baraita continues and says, "En li ela lager benetina lagoy b'mechira. Lager b'mechira minayin." This pasuk has two categories. It says a Nevelah. That means an animal that died on its own, not with shechita, or a non-kosher animal that died. These are called Nevelah. You're not allowed to eat it yourself, but you can get benefit from it. And so the pasuk says, I can give it to a ger, or I can sell it to a goy. Those are two categories. So now I only know that I can give it to a ger as a gift, and I can sell it to a goy. Now, what if I want to sell it to a ger, right? Would that be okay? Talmud lomar lager asher b'sharecha titenena o machor. לגוי בנתינה מנין, תלמוד לומר, תיתננה בהאכלה או מחור לגוי. נמצאת אומר, אחד גר ואחד גוי, בין במכירה, בין בנתינה, דברי רבי מאיר. Let me show you in the pasuk. So we're just going to do some fancy footwork with the punctuation here to show that you can sell it. His point is he's more lenient. You can sell it or gift it to either a stranger or a foreigner. Either way, it doesn't really matter. And although the pasuk says two categories, you can put the comma anywhere you want, as follows. So it says, don't eat it. Any Nevelah. Lager asher bisharecha titenena v'achala o machor. You can put the comma here after the machor, and that way you can read it as you should, to the stranger, you can either give it or machor or sell it, comma, right? Or you could put the comma beforehand and here, and you say, Titenena v'achala o machor la nochri. You can give it as a gift or sell it to a non-Jew. Okay, right? So since you can put the comma in either place, therefore he's reading it both ways. And so it doesn't matter which way you do it. That's Rabbi Meir. Now the Yehuda is more stringent. The Yehuda omer devarim kichtavan. You have to do it exactly as it is prescribed. Lager b'netina u'legoy b'mechira. To the resident alien, you have to give it as a gift. You cannot sell it to him. And to the non-Jew, you have to sell it to him. You can't give it as a gift. My Tamad Rabbi Yehuda, why? Isakadatech kedamad Rabbi Meir, lichtov lachamana lager asher bisharecha titenen v'achala u'machor. Oh, lamali. So he doesn't agree with Rabbi Meir because it says the word or, which is this or that, and not if it wanted to say this and that, it would have said ooh, and then you could have read it more easily, put the comma in either place. But the or really separates the two. So therefore, Shema Mina lidvarim kichtavan, and therefore he's following kichtavan, what we might call the peshat reading of it. Okay, good. Now, Rabbi Meir so that's a good question. How about Rabbi Meir? Why does it say the word or, which sounds like it separates? Laktim netina deger lemchira degoy. So it does separate a little bit and saying you could do either one, but it's nicer. It's better if you have a choice to give it to a ger or sell it to a goy. Better to give it to a ger as a gift. After all, this Nevelah is not really worth a lot of money because most, the Jews cannot eat it. And so since you're not losing out so much, give it as a gift to the ger. That's nice to do. But Rabbi Yehuda, halo sarich kera kevan de ger ata mesuve lachayoto vegoy yeta mesuve lachayoto lo sarich kera sevarahu. Rabbi Yehuda agrees in essence that it's better to gift it to a neighbor who's a non-Jew, someone who lives among you, because you are obligated to help him out, right? The ged that lives among you, you have to. And he's poor. You have to help him. Whereas the foreigner, non-Jew, who's just passing through, he's here on a business trip. I don't have an obligation to sustain him. But everybody knows that. That's already. I know that from the laws of charity. I don't need this pasuk to tell me that. So they both agree that better to give it to a ged. But Rabbi Meir learns it from the word "ah," and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't need to learn it from the word "ah," and therefore the word "ah" for Rabbi Yehuda is free to separate the two categories, and so they're not based on the same. And read it according to the Peshat. Okay, now why we bring all this to relate it to what we said above. Bishlama de Rabbi Meir damar echad ger ve'echad goy ben b'mechira ben b'netina. V'deistirich kera leMishra Nevelah b'hanaa ha kol isurin shabattorah asurin ben b'achila ben b'hanaa. Okay, so what we're trying to do is relate Rabbi Abhu's position. He says that the default default of all isurim is that benefit is also not allowed unless it goes out of its way and teaches you something else. So that reading makes sense according to Rabbi Meir, because according to Rabbi Meir, he is following. We need the pasuk here to tell us that that the Nevelah is permitted behana'ah, because otherwise we would not know it. However, according to the Yehuda, who says that we're reading this according to the Peshat, so then I actually need to know that I need this pasuk for this context. How do I know that I can use this pasuk for every other context? That all the others are asurim b'hana'ah, right? So in other words, according to the Meir's understanding of it, that this pasuk is coming to say that you can give it to both categories. So therefore, the pasuk can also teach me that this is exceptional. But according to the Yehuda, where I would not, I'm just reading it as in the plain way, so then this cannot be a source for others. So therefore, I need another source according to the Yehuda. So he can learn it from a different pasuk. Nafkale mi lakeleb tashlichun oto. This is not regarding Terefah, an animal that died and it was sick, or it was died in the field. So that you can give it to a dog. Oto atamashich lakeleb. So that means that only that in particular you can give to a dog, but not anything else in the Torah, only that one. And so that's how the Yehuda will derive that this is particular to these laws, not anything else. What's Meir going to do with the law of the dog? Oh, the case of Nevelah that says you can give it to the dog, that's coming to exclude only that you can give to the dog, but not another case, cholin. If I take a regular animal, that's not a sacrifice, and I go and I do shechita in the Bet HaMikdash, I'm not allowed to do that, right? Only allowed to do shechita on sacrifices in the Bet HaMikdash, not others. So if I do, then I can still derive benefit from it. And so that's why it says just this, but not anything else. Ve'idach, and so how about Yehuda? What's he going to do with that? He doesn't agree with at all that if you take a regular animal and sacrifice it in the Bet HaMikdash, he says that prohibition is not deoraita to begin with, and therefore you don't need a pasuk to tell me that I can take that and that food and derive benefit from it. And so instead, that pasuk can be used for other laws to teach me about the default. So in some, Hizkiah says the default is always going to be just about eating, unless he uses a passive verb. The Abhu says the default is it's always prohibited to derive benefit from it, unless it says otherwise. And how does he know that? Well, either according to the Meir, he can derive that from the fact that Nevelah makes an exception, and Yehuda can derive it from the fact that Terefah is the exception. And so we've accounted for all the different opinions. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.